added to stage. When people were talking, she'd sort of like be sat there, all nice and proper, go, just like that, you know, or she'd go. But a famous one was like as if she said, "You what?" But anyway, like and subscribe to my channel. It helps to get me through to the YouTube algorithms. So, and I would really appreciate it if you could leave your DNA on that button for me. Right, let's play this for you.
In an unprecedented move,
we were willing to take an unusual step of coming forward.
Look, I never thought I would be sitting here.
Kourie Richens' attorneys,
she is distraught. She is heartbroken.
Reached out to 2 News Investigates.
That's exactly why we came here. And really, it's an ethical duty.
We have a lot of confidence in you.
To set the record straight.
One thing that's been reported on that they have let go, have not corrected.
If their goal is justice, they have not lived up to it, at least in this case.
A 2 News exclusive.
And I feel that when I see these narratives come out,
how can they still speculate that Kourie was innocent after all the letters she wrote, like Walk the Dog letter? She got a ghostwriter to write that book, How to Overcome Grief. You know, and there's so much more evidence that she was guilty. You know, no wonder it only took the jury 3 hours. I was expecting 9 hours. But I was really surprised when they came back after 3 hours that she was guilty, guilty, guilty. And then she's got another 26 cases of fraud and things to go through yet. So, you know, I bet they're going to try and appeal this. I wouldn't be surprised.
it becomes a game. It becomes another line. And we forget that there's somebody on, and that's a client. That's a human. That's a mother.
A Camas mom charged with murdering her husband.
The narrative is that your client is the Moscow Mule murderer. Is that accurate?
A narrative of alcohol, drugs, and greed.
There are certain things that are out there that we know right now, sitting here today, just aren't accurate.
And her attorneys say false information.
I do think the prosecution has declined.
This lady here is working on the Kirk court thing when he got shot. And I saw a glimpse of it the other day and I thought, oh, blimey, she's on that one. So obviously she's a very high-powered lady, doesn't like to lose, but they lost this time.
To correct false information that has come out in the media, and we've waited and hoped to occur, and it never has.
Tonight, Richens' attorneys speak out only to 2 News Investigates.
That's a very, very different narrative.
Camas, Utah, a small town in Summit County with about 2,000 residents. Among them, Kourie and Eric Richens and their 3 boys.
Their family was so beautiful. Everything was picture perfect.
Linda King used to work with Kourie Richens at Home Depot and remembered Eric, who was a contractor coming into the store.
You can never forget his laugh. And I love that laugh so much.
Linda says she encouraged Eric to ask Kourie out after she caught his eye.
I says, go over there and check out with her, so they did. And anyway, they ended up having a date. From then on, they were like glued to each other. It was perfect, I thought.
Perfect until March 4th, 2022, when Eric was found dead inside the couple's home. Police originally ruled that there was no foul play in Eric's death from fentanyl. Then a year and 2 months later, things changed. On May 8th, 2023, Kourie was charged with her husband's murder. Prosecutors have added additional counts of financial crimes as well. As of today, Kourie's charged with aggravated murder, attempted criminal homicide, 2 counts of insurance fraud, and forgery.
Wendy Lewis, and I am lead counsel in the Kourie Richens case.
Kathy Nestor, I am one of the attorneys on the Kourie Richens case.
Alexander Ramos, co-counsel on the Kourie Richens case.
Wendy Lewis, Kathy Nestor, and Alex Ramos took over as Richens' attorneys in May of 2024 after her previous attorney declared a conflict in the case.
What we came in here today were to focus on 4 very serious areas that have been absolutely factually reported incorrectly and that have been discussed publicly in court, in open court. I do think the prosecution has declined to correct false information that has come out in the media, and we've waited and hoped that that would occur, and it never has. And so that is why now, at this moment, at this time, we're coming forward and saying, well, then we're going to correct it. So that's where we are, and that's why we're here.
First up,
The narrative is that your client is the Moscow Mule murderer. Is that accurate? Can you confirm what the murder weapon is?
I can't confirm what the murder weapon is because the prosecution has never told us their theory. They have never said that it was given in a Moscow Mule, that fentanyl was distributed or in a Moscow Mule. During the preliminary hearing, their lead detective was on the stand, and I asked him the question, sitting here today, do you know how Kourie Richens administered fentanyl to Eric Richens? And he said, no. The prosecution has never said that it was in a Moscow Mule. That came up because there was discussions, and I believe a statement by Ms. Richens early on, that she and her husband had drank a Moscow Mule before dinner. So that was something that was just grabbed onto. It's sexy, it's interesting, the Moscow Mule murderer, but the prosecution has never said that that is their theory of the case, not once. I still, sitting here today, don't really know how they're going to claim that Eric Richens ingested fentanyl.
Does the prosecution have an obligation to correct the record, the public record of this?
I mean, it's the prosecution's job to bring justice. That's what you do as a prosecutor. As a defense attorney, you protect needs to find justice, fight for justice. And I believe by not correcting the record, by letting falsities sit out there, that's not what is happening. Now, we'll see what happens in the courtroom, but that, in our view, is something that they should have corrected.
Can you confirm then that the fentanyl was administered in the Moscow Mule, given what you just said about the lead detective O'Driscoll? He couldn't confirm it, correct?
We cannot confirm what their theory is. We believe Ms. Richens is innocent. And, we're not here to convince you or anyone else that she's innocent other than those 8 people that are in the box at the trial. Those are the people we need to convince that she's innocent. So that's not why I'm sitting here, but we do want what is accurate to be out there. A lot of it will come out at trial, but there are certain things that are out there that we know right now, sitting here today, just aren't accurate. And the Moscow Mule appears to be one of them. Now, since they have not ever said to us exactly what they think their theory is, I suppose we could be surprised at trial and they'll say, oh, it was the Moscow Mule after all. But they have never stated that in court ever, or in any pleadings or in any way.
The prosecution has painted your client as the Moscow Mule murderer. What is your opinion on that?
The Moscow Mule has never been stated in open court as being used to cause someone's death. I'm not sure where the press came up with that, but the lead detective has testified under oath that as of now, he does not know how fentanyl arrived in Mr. Richens' body. And so the press claiming that there's a murder weapon, that this was it, is just wholly fanciful. It just didn't happen, and it's not ever been said by the prosecution in this case, and it's never been in a pleading in this case, and it's just inaccurate.
Second, was Kourie in financial distress because of her real estate business? Prosecutors have said at the time of Eric Richens' death, K. Richens Realty owed hard money lenders more than $1.8 million.
Kathy, before this, was your client solvent?
So that's one of the issues we felt compelled to speak to the press about. There has been quite a bit of reporting about my client's financial situation. And the concern that we have is that the reports that have come out about her business, the solvency of her business, utterly fail to take into consideration a huge piece of property that she obtained 2 days after her husband passed away. And that's removed from all of the state's calculations. Equity in that house alone, the value of that one piece of property was enough to cover any debt that she had in her business. And we just feel that that is improper reporting, that it's that arbitrarily cutting off what condition her business was in prior to her husband's death without taking that into consideration is misleading. Furthermore, all of the reporting that is done only focuses on what we call debt service, not the actual value of the property she held. So that's completely being kept out. So it would be like if they said, you know, Ms. Halloran, what is your net worth? And you left out your house. I mean, that's a piece of property is an asset and it has value, and that's never taken into consideration. And so we believe that that has also been misreported, and that's something we felt ethically compelled to come forward and correct.
Third, life insurance.
Well, another one that's out there's false is that she took out hundreds of thousands of dollars in life insurance on him shortly before he died. That's not true. She took out one policy that came in the mail, and it was one of those mailers we all get from our credit union saying, sign here for $100,000 free life insurance. Sign here for yourself, sign here for your spouse. You can get $100,000 free life insurance. That was sent in. She sent that in about a month before he died, 4 or 5 weeks before he died. All the rest of his life insurance, and he had a lot of life insurance, was all taken out by him long before that. And he knew of all the life insurance policies that were out on him. And we don't know if he knew of that last one. But in terms of her taking out a life insurance policy on him, that's the only one, $100,000. So their motive, according to the state, is, oh, she took out life insurance, she was going to cash in on all this money. And again, that's not accurate. I mean, she took out an extra $100,000, which may seem like a lot to a lot of people, and it is a lot, but to this family, the other life insurance was well in excess of that last $100,000. And that amount of money for this family was not really all that much.
Does the prosecution have an ethical obligation to correct these things that are out in the narrative?
Again, I think if what they want is justice to be served, they have an obligation to do that. Of course, their real obligation is in the courtroom, and we'll just have to see what happens then.
And the final point, the Google searches regarding how much fentanyl it would take to kill someone.
There are a number of things. You talked about the Moscow Mule, which, you know, we believe is not their theory. They've never said it was their theory. And I think the facts that come out in trial will make it very obvious that that isn't even a possibility. But one thing that's been reported on that they have let go, have not corrected, is that Ms. Richens Googled how much fentanyl does it take to kill someone. And that's been in the press, and it's been extrapolated from that she Googled that before Eric Richens' death. And that's just not the case. We've discovered through court records, through exhibits, that she Googled how much fentanyl does it take to kill someone a day or two after she was told he died of fentanyl poisoning, not before, which makes perfect sense. She doesn't know how her husband died. She's told, your husband died of fentanyl poisoning, and she's looking, well, what does this mean? How much fentanyl would someone have to take to die of fentanyl poisoning? That's a very, very different narrative than to leave it out there that, oh, the Moscow Mule murderer Googled how much fentanyl does it take to kill someone. No, that's not what happened.
One thing that's also been different in this case for the attorneys is how the prosecution is handling it.
The language that the prosecution uses in its filings, do you feel at any point that they have crossed the line?
Yes, this has been interesting. I have not seen the personal language in filings typically in court that we're seeing here. The prosecution does seem to have a very strong opinion on this case, not just here's the evidence. They seem to have a personal opinion, which I think is reflected in their pleadings and has been reported on, some more than others. The poppycock memo was one that got reported on, which is surprising and unusual to see language like that in legal pleadings. So we've been uncomfortable with that. I see the prosecutor's job, like I said, is to fight for justice. It's not personal. It's not personal for them, and it shouldn't be personal for us either. We're all there doing our job. We're there to protect our client's rights. We're there to make sure our client gets a fair trial. They're there to serve justice. And what they think is justice and what we think is justice is very often the opposite. But it begins to get personal sometimes, I think, when it's a case that it is high profile. There is a lot to it. They've been working on it a very long time. And, I can see that sometimes you can't help but get personal. Sometimes we can't help but feel personally upset about our clients. It's hard. It's a job, but it's hard. Some prosecutors are better than others at not making it personal. It's just been my observation, and maybe I'll be proven at some point in the future, but this has become quite personal for them.
The defense attorneys come to 2 News Investigates. Why now? Why not just correct?
But also, surely when they did an autopsy on Eric, they would have found out what the contents of his stomach was, whether it's food or liquid. I know they still got to fight for their client, saying she's innocent because that's what they're being paid to do. But Kourie isn't innocent. The evidence is so much against her. And with them saying about her equity in her property would have been more than enough to cover that 100,000 life insurance or the other property she was hoping to buy, bought and flip over. From what I understand is the equity is what your house is worth. But if they haven't paid off their mortgage, then if they sold that house they were living in, they would only make, what's left. Well, they would lose what's left of their mortgage, wouldn't they? So if their house was, say, worth $3,000, and I know it's not going to be worth $3,000, but just for easiness, if it was worth, say, $3,000, and their mortgage was for $3,000 or maybe a little bit higher because you want to furnish it and do bits and pieces to it. And then you sell the house, it depends what the house is worth on that particular day. That house could be less than the $3,000, or it could be more than the $3,000, just hypothetical. But, Kourie wouldn't have stood to get anything if Kourie divorced or Eric divorced her, because that was in the prenuptial agreement that, everything will go to the kids. It would go into trust. So he was looking out for his children, not her. He obviously had an inkling about her to, cut her out from the life insurances and things that she wouldn't get nothing. It all goes to trust for the boys. So she knew damn well if she divorced him or vice versa, she would come out with nothing. And then he would probably go for custody for the 3 boys. So, it spirals out of control that way. But she was worried in not having any money. She wanted the kids. She wanted the fame and glory of being an entrepreneur on flipping properties for profit. All she could see was dollar signs in front of her eyes. And that is all she could see. And by killing Eric, that is one way she'll get the money. But, it'd be interesting on the next court case to hear about the 26 charges else she's going to get. Are they going to be the same attorneys for that one? Will they still say she's innocent? From all the evidence I could hear, and I forget this attorney's name here, but when she was doing her defense at the end, she was like shouting at the court. You don't need to shout at the court. You got a microphone. You can just talk in your normal level voice. You don't need to shout it across. I mean, Mr. Bloodworth didn't shout it across. He still reminds me of Dracula. He really does. And his name as well, Bloodworth, and then Dracula. I just can't get that image out of my head. Every time I was watching him, I was saying, Mr. Drackler, Mr. Drackler. But the points he had were exceptionally good points. You know, I'm still new to all these court cases. You know, I'm slowly picking up bits and pieces. But from what I could see, from all the evidence given, it was a given fact that Kourie was guilty. You know, some cases I've watched, I think, I don't know. I need to see a bit more, really, or someone explain something in a different way for me to be able to determine guilty or not guilty. But this case was so clear-cut. It was so clear-cut. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a Netflix still coming out of this. I really, you know, I can't wait to see if there is.
Wreck the record at trial.
Look, I never thought I would be sitting here. I don't think I should need to talk to the media. I really believe that I should be able to get a fair trial. But the way that this case has gone, I don't think we can do that. We have to make sure that when we step in there in February, that we have leveled the playing field. And we can't just...
Is that why you came to me?
That's exactly why we... And duty. There's a rules of professional conduct that says if we think that there are facts out there that have been laid out in such a way that we think goes against our client's best interest, that we have a duty to come out. I think some defense attorneys do hide behind, hey, I'm just not going to speak, no comment. And I think that's fair. I do it a lot. But this is different.
Because we don't get an opportunity to argue the facts until we're in front of a jury. The judge decides the law, a jury decides the facts. And what's in the narrative right now and in the public media is facts. So we won't have that opportunity until we're at trial and the jury is sitting in the box. And like I said, our concern is, can she get a fair trial when all of this is out there before we ever get an opportunity to show our side of the story and to show what we believe really happened in this case?
What do you believe happened in this case?
We believe that she's innocent and the rest will come out during the trial. Because like I said, it's the people in the box that we need to convince, not the viewers, not anyone else. We just want to make sure that people don't come into that trial believing things that are absolutely false. We don't want to spend the time in the trial convincing people that what they've already heard is wrong. We want to spend our time, you know, presenting our case without having to go back and argue against what's in the media.
Is the prosecution in this case injecting a false narrative to the media?
I don't know if they're necessarily injecting it, but they're certainly not correcting it. And I think that's why we're here today, is we honestly feel that we have an ethical duty when we have a client who is facing such serious charges and there is misinformation out there and it is not being corrected. It's a disservice to justice.
With that said, then how critical should the public be with this narrative? Or is the public just taking the prosecution's statements and narratives at face value because it's the prosecution, it's the state of Utah?
I think that's part of it. I think also it's easy because of the headlines to just go along with it. And when somebody who we trust, right, the county attorneys throughout this state, the district attorneys, we trust that they're going to make the right choices when they charge, but also it doesn't end there. It's also through the prosecution of a case. And with such a high profile case, I think the public needs to be even more critical, because if what's going on in this case goes on to a lesser degree in other cases that don't get the exposure, that don't have the appropriate, resources, that's when our country starts to become in danger.
And if I may ask you this, I'm not sure if you will answer, but it's
not their job to either vilify or create or make them insane, but it is their job to stick with the facts. And that's something that they have not done in this case, especially with how it's been portrayed in the media. If justice, they have not lived up to it, at least in this case.
Why reach out to 2 News Investigates?
I don't know. I mean, we have a lot of confidence in you, and we're hoping that you can get the word out and that it's, you know, it's kind of the one pebble in a pond, right? That once you throw a pebble in and the waves spread out. And we're hoping that once we correct it in one place that's credible, that's a well-known news source, that maybe the other news sources will also start to question a little more about what they're hearing and what they're covering, just so that the importance is that the facts that are reported accurately. And we really appreciate the opportunity to come forward and correct what we think has gotten out there incorrectly.
When you hear these false narratives and you know who you believe to be the truth,
It's extremely frustrating. I think being a defense attorney, being a judge, a bailiff, it feels routine. You possibly in your job when you're doing things feel routine, but you're doing so much in your job that means something. And it's no different in the courts. We walk in, we joke around, we know everybody. At the end of the day though, we're doing something very special in there, every single hearing, and especially when we're in trial. And what we're doing is we're upholding the Constitution. And that's a very high bar. And I feel that when I see these narratives come out, it becomes a game. It becomes another line. And we forget that there's somebody on the end of that. And that's a client. That's a human. That's a mother. And it does really frustrate me.
is Kourie aware of these narratives, and how does she handle what you claim is misinformation being spread?
She is distraught. She is heartbroken. This has been very, very difficult for Ms. Richens. She's been in jail now for over 2 years on these charges and doesn't have an opportunity to really tell her story until we're in trial. So yes, it's been very difficult on her.
I asked Summit County Attorney Margaret Olson and Chief Prosecutor Brad Bloodworth for an on-camera interview for this report. I received the following statement. We are aware of the recent filings submitted by the defense. We will address all matters related to this case through the legal process rather than in the media. Our formal response will be part of the public record next week. We ask that this comment be included in your report to ensure our position is accurately represented and the reporting remains balanced.
Charges and you're trying to make a decision, like what are you in determining not just whether someone deserves to get a deal, but at the same time, this might be the person we really want to use the leverage against more than the other?
Well, classically, you want the person who's committed the lesser of the two crimes to be the one you make the deal with. In this case, that would likely be the mother, at least in what we know right now. She was not the one who violently shook the baby. The allegation is it's the father.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, gone on to another case, have we? I didn't realise it's suddenly gone on to another case. Yeah, so what do you think? Let me add a photo to thing. I mean, there's so many arguments over this, isn't there? I haven't got my glasses on. Might help to see my files. Let's see, Kourie. Is that the one I was going to bring up? No. Anyway, but yeah, what does everyone else think? I think from what I heard following the case that she was guilty. You know, I don't know. I can't remember when the law enforcement said about the search on her phone, how much, poison, does it take to, that's the word. And how much or fent it would take to kill a person. I don't know. I didn't recall seeing that, if it was done before the unaliving of Eric or if it was done a few days after. But, they all had to try and prove a point. Obviously, if they can get their client to be not guilty, is more of a win-win for them. You know, so I can see the two lots of lawyers, Bloodworth and his lot, and Cassie's lot, going to be fighting it out, saying, but anyway, I thought I'd bring that to you. And it'd be interesting to see what other people thought of it as well. So, right, till the next one. Don't forget to like and